like any sovereign country, we reserve the right to defend ourselves against a country that calls and works for our destruction.
That, of course, is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier today in Ottawa. He's making the case for a potential strike against Iran, and he's warning that time is running out for dialogue. Stephen Harper, on the other hand, is urging a peaceful resolution. But should Canada support Israel if it comes down to military intervention? Joining me now, Mark Dubowitz, Executive Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's in Washington. And here in the studio with me is Peter Jones, Associate Professor in the University of Ottawa's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Peter, let me start with you. What did you make of the language that you heard from both Stephen Harper and Benjamin Netanyahu today?
Well, I thought Stephen Harper's comments were very interesting. I thought, depending on which side of the debate you're on, you can extract from what he said something that will give you comfort. He said Israel has the right to defend itself, but I want a peaceful solution to this. So I think it was a very carefully crafted message designed to sort of appeal to both sides of the issue, because it is a controversial issue here in Canada. I thought Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments were quite interesting. He didn't really say anything new, but he did go into a little bit more detail than we generally hear with respect to what Israel wants. He wants no enrichment in Iran at all. He wants all the enriched material to be to be taken out of Iran. He wants certain facilities closed down. That's a pretty specific laundry list, and I think most people who study this think it's more than is likely to happen through diplomacy. So he's either setting up a big ask, knowing that he'll get less than that, or he's laying out some pretty firm conditions.
Yeah, Mark, you probably didn't have the same opportunity to watch it live here, but from your point of view, you heard, as Peter described, Benjamin Netanyahu, and earlier on the show, Mark Regev, his porte-parole, his spokesperson, saying all options are on the table, and he's willing to act alone if needed. How should we be interpreting that?
Well, I think we should be taking that very, very seriously. I mean, I think the Israelis, it's becoming increasingly clear that Prime Minister Netanyahu is basically at the end of the line, and that he's looking for a very firm commitment from the United States when he comes here on Sunday and Monday to meet with the President, that the U.S. President is committed to all options, and that means a serious military strike on Iranian facilities if all peaceful options are exhausted. I think that the Israelis are running out of time, they're running out of patience, and I think that they're deeply skeptical that sanctions are going to work. I think they think economic sanctions are a delusion because they're not going to change the risk-reward calculus of the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei with respect to a nuclear weapon.
Just to follow up on that, because Mark Regev, when he was here earlier mentioning all options, he also talked about that window that you mentioned, and he did say sanctions do appear to be having some bite.
Well, I think they're having a bite on the Iranian economy. There's no doubt the Iranian economy is in crisis. The inflation rate is at 40–50% unofficially. The currency is in free fall. Iranian oil revenue is being targeted. So there's no doubt that the economic crisis has been precipitated by sanctions. What's seriously in doubt, I think, from the Israeli perspective, is whether that's going to change the risk-reward calculus of this regime with respect to a nuclear weapon, and indeed whether there even is a risk-reward calculus at play here, and that the Iranian regime is so committed to nuclear weapons capability that they will move ahead regardless of the kind of pressure that's put on the regime and on the Iranian economy.
Do you see it the same way, Peter?
Not entirely. I think we've seen over the past 25 years of this, it's been a long, drawn-out weapons program that they've waxed and they've waned, they've slowed down, they've sped up. It's not been a sort of a relentless straight line towards a nuclear weapon. So I think that there is the possibility that they could decide to slow down, to go in a different direction. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is right to say that there is a danger of them running out the clock or trying to run out the clock. That's a genuine problem, and I think that you'll see that this time around, and partly because of the Israeli pressure on the possibility of a unilateral Israeli strike, the international community won't relax sanctions even as Iran comes to the table. That's probably something Iran will ask for and won't get. I do think diplomacy has a few more months on this. I think that it's unlikely there'll be anything before the summer. I know that there's some talk of something in April. I don't think that's likely. I think that most people recognize that the P5+1 talks are going to be given a chance to have another round. So I think there's a few months to go yet.
Okay. I read earlier a statement from the Iranian charge, and here's what he had to say. I think we have a board here. Iran, as a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, has every right to have a nuclear program for peaceful purposes, including enrichment, and no one can deny Iranian people of their rights. It is Israel that should be accountable, and forced to accept NPT and put all its nuclear weapons and installations under IAEA inspections. I'm assuming, Mark, it doesn't surprise you that kind of level of bellicosity, but you know, it does suggest that there are intractable positions on all sides here.
Well, it suggests that the Iranians really are deluded, because the international community completely rejects that position. I mean, I think Iran is unique in that it's threatening the extinction of a member of the United Nations. It denies the Holocaust. It is committing terrorist activities around the world. It tried to assassinate a Saudi ambassador in a Georgetown restaurant in Washington, D.C. I mean, it is an international outlaw with a rap sheet as long as your arm. So I think nobody in the international community accepts that argument. And I think that the reality is that this regime historically has only paused when it believes that the United States is willing to intervene militarily. It did in 1988 when Khomeini drank the poison chalice, as he said, when he thought the United States was going to intervene in the Iran-Iraq war. And they also perhaps stopped weaponizing in 2003 when they thought that the U.S. Army, which was in Baghdad at the time disposing of Saddam Hussein, was going to then focus on Iran next. So it's clear, I think, from the historical record, I disagree with Peter. I don't think this waxes and wanes based on political pressure or even economic sanctions. It waxes and wanes when the regime believes that there's going to be military intervention that threatens its survival. And I think that that is what the Israelis are looking for from the U.S. president, a clear indication the United States will intervene militarily to stop a nuclear program.
Will he get that, do you think? Let me start with Peter, and I'll go back to you, Mark.
Well, I think he'll get the standard everything's on the table. I think he'll get the things that President Obama said today in the Atlantic magazine interview, which were a little bit tougher than we've heard, but nothing really new, just a different tone. I'm not sure I completely agree with Mark's comment about it's only military pressure that causes the Iranians to stop or to pause. I think that to some extent we haven't gone this far with sanctions yet, and that's one of the things that the Israeli pressure has done to the international community, is put sanctions much more firmly on the table than has been the case. I think there's also politics in Iran. I mean, they're having an election today. There are political changes that happen in Iran, not so much since 2009, since the 2009 election, but over the years of the Iranian Revolution. I think we've seen different approaches to things. I think that there has always been a nuclear research program. There's no question of that. And a nuclear weapons research program. But I think if you look carefully at the record, in a technical sense, it hasn't been a continuous program to build weapons. And in fact, the American intelligence community is of that view as well.
Mark?
Well, the American intelligence community believes that the Iranians may have stopped weaponization in 2003, but I think the consensus view is that the Iranians were deeply concerned that there would be a U.S. military intervention. I mean, look, I've supported sanctions. I think we all would like to see sanctions work. I think we pray that it will work so that there's a peaceful resolution to this. But I think as serious analysts of this problem, I think we have to be realistic in assessing what the security needs are of various actors. And I think that the Israeli perception is very clear. We're running out of time. They don't believe sanctions will work. And they don't necessarily trust this president to make that decision. All options on the table is one of those expressions that is starting to lose its meaning because it's so oft repeated. I think that President Obama, in his speech on Sunday, needs to come out forcefully to remind the American people that this is not about Israeli national security. This is about American national security, and that a nuclear-armed Iran will lead to a cascade of proliferation, nuclear-armed Middle East where every country is on a hair trigger, and that will be devastating for American national security. I think if that Prime Minister Netanyahu hears that, perhaps his mind will be changed, that this president is serious about protecting America and stopping an Iranian nuke. Otherwise, I'm very fearful that we're going to see an Israeli strike within the next at least 12 months, maybe sooner, maybe later.
Mark Dubowitz, Executive Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and Peter Jones, Associate Professor at University of Ottawa's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.